I want to make an adjustment here, John. I'm just going to drop this a tiny bit. Where are we with this? Right, I'm going to just bring this around to here. How you doing, Kayla?
Wow.
Yeah? Good. Could I get an apple box for her?
Yeah,
That'd
there's
be great. Okay, so Kayla, if you just... We're going to give you an apple box for your feet so that you can... Yeah. Does that help you get... Yeah, and you can give me a bit of shape in the body. Just there we go.
You can probably take
Good.
your shoes off too.
If you want to take your shoes off, up to you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah? Make sure the model's comfortable. That always helps with expression. Thank you. And you get a pair of shoes.
See, and what Felix is doing is amazing because he's making sure that the model is feeling comfortable, and that shows in the expressions. You know, when a photographer doesn't communicate with their model, it's going to show right away. So you're wasting a lot of time.
Okay, good. So I'm just kind of using mirroring. We have the secret language. There we go. Beautiful. All right, you can bring your chin down just a tad if you want. Perfect. Good. So what I've already achieved now is she's twisted around a little bit, and we should get a little bit more light on her hair. If everything is done right. There we go. Not quite. Good. So this is what always ends up happening. I compete with the light source. So, going to be kind of what's going on here.
Which way you want to go?
Oh, I see. Okay, so let's see what happens here. So I'm just going to keep doing light test, light test, light test. Get this thing to focus. There we go.
That's getting better.
That's getting better. So we're getting more detail in the hair, right?
And you can see even under the
that.
chin, you're getting more
Of a shadow?
definition too.
Yeah.
Like you're starting to see the the jawline coming in.
Yeah.
And a lot more of the hair detail. The
Now,
balance is starting to get really nice.
I want to ask you about this backdrop, because that's my Oliphant backdrop that I'm shooting on. It's my go-to for everything.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I did a commercial job the other day, and actually hired you to retouch it.
Right.
And the client kind of said, "Can we make the background black?"
Yeah.
And I said to him, "Yeah, but I want to have a little bit of detail just in case we need to make adjustments to it."
Exactly.
Was that correct?
No,
estimation?
actually, that's the best way to go because sometimes clients will change their mind later as
Okay.
well, as you so well know. They'll be like, hey, I actually liked it what it was originally.
Okay.
And they'll override it. So keeping that detail is very important.
So I have a little bit of detail, but it would be very easy for me to kind of make that black. If I go down into the curves, let's have a look here. I might be making claims I can't, promises I can't
Watch what you
keep.
say, Felix.
Well, yeah, you could mask it out.
Exactly.
But you could get that black background.
Absolutely. You can definitely mask it out later.
Beautiful.
But I think having that detail before would be better than just making it black now.
So we're keeping the background just off of black.
Yeah.
For a reason. If I took this whole setup and moved it up here, there would be less light falling on the background, and I could get it to go to black.
Yeah, it's always better to have more detail than less. That's just a primary example. Because like I said, sometimes clients will change their mind, especially in post-production, or I'll have multiple revisions. They'll just go back and forth. The other thing is sometimes people like to shoot more contrasty, but from a post-production perspective, it's better to shoot a little bit flatter and have more information on both ways, so you can then change your mind if you need to later on.
That's a good point. That leads me to what I was going to do next.
Oh, fantastic. I read your mind right there.
This is working well, Pratik. Could I get the circular reflector?
Yeah. What color do you want?
White, please. Do we have a white side on there?
Oh, we can pop it out and make it white.
Okay. So, again, if I was retouching this myself, I would want to be as lazy as I can be. But I'm sending this to Pratik, so I'm going to play around and see if just here, you can see that on the screen, I can get a little bit of detail. I'm going to play around with that. And then I might even change the hair around to get it more into the frame and get more of a shape on her. But that's more a photography thing, not retouching.
And though, that's a good point because you shoot almost like there's no Photoshop, right? I mean, you're shooting to get everything as good as possible as if we can do it later.
Well, I was lying in bed last night, I was thinking about this. Is this where I go, right, well, we can just do that in Photoshop because I have a retoucher on set? And it's actually the opposite. I want to ask him questions that enable me to have a better final result.
Yes, because remember, retouching is not about fixing your mistakes. It's about making your work better.
Aspirational.
Right.
That's someone in the audience.
Yeah, it's never about, Photoshop is not about fixing mistakes. It's not a crutch, it's not a safety net. It's basically something where you get a good base file and you build off of it. You're not fixing makeup, you're not fixing the hair, you're enhancing what's already there. Okay?
Exactly. John, if I get you on this side of the set, perfect.
behind
And we're just going to try this to show. I want to get some light into their hair, mostly. Right, good. Perfect, Kayla. And let's try, why don't we do this just to get you to have that kind of, seductress kind of feel? Yeah, good. And you're going to be looking kind of down at me, kind of down at the camera. Yes, lovely. Good. And I should now, you see, just by doing that subtle move, I have turned her around a little bit. There we go. You see, we're starting to build a beauty image that just from that subtle thing where I don't even see her arms, but it gives her that mode to feel it. Lovely. So this is where we're going somewhere. Again, I have less contrast here than I would want, but that's for Pratik, right?
Yeah, and here's another interesting point. If you're a retoucher specifically, it's always important to see the photography aspect of this because you're able to see how light changes on set and what realism looks like. Because sometimes what happens when you get in post-production as a retoucher who doesn't have photography knowledge, you start tweaking light in a way that you don't understand, and things don't look right. And this gives you a good idea of what happens when you start opening up shadows and where they open up, right? You get a good idea of what light does and the properties of it. So I think one of the best things to do is if you're a retoucher is to go on set with a photographer like Felix and see what happens to light so you understand what looks good in post-production.
Yeah. And, one other thing I was going to say. You notice I'm making adjustments, and every time I take a picture, Capture One just takes that adjustment and applies it to the next image. It's brilliant. So let's, Pratik, I want to kind of get with you here and figure out where I would want to go with this if I was showing it to the client on set, because we have this tethered here and it's kind of nice. And I think this lends itself maybe to a little bit of a warmer feel.
Definitely.
So I'm going to just play with that. See, if I go cool, it kind of gets that commercial look.
Right.
I think it should be more dreamy.
Now, actually, that's a good point. How would you like to describe to people what type of toning you do, or the mood? Does it come from her expression? Does it come from the client?
Like I said with the makeup, I saw Kayla, and then I said, why don't we do this?
Right.
And that, because I shoot portraiture and normal people, that's what I have to do.
Right.
I'm not, Kayla is kind of, I think you were my lifestyle model, right? Just nod.
Actress mostly, yeah.
Yeah, actress, and I think there's personality, and that's why we chose her. And, for me, that really works. But the person forms where I'm going with it. It's a little bit different than what a fashion photographer would do, where they need just an object kind of to sit there.
Makes sense.
Does that answer your question?
Sure. And it's always, I think, the other thing, it's very personal, isn't it, in terms of what direction you want to go to. Everyone has their own choice and ideas.
Yeah.
It's never a set stone rule.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, when I'm messing around in here, I literally just go with the sliders and go, do I like that or not? And
Exactly. It's that simple. It's never, this is what it should be. This is what it should be.
Yeah.
Because it's always a personal thing.
There is no rule that I follow. I just go kind of like, this is my, do I like it or not? Go ahead, do you have a question?
I was just wondering, do you use any white balancing tools with this, or are you mostly working with your own eye?
Ta-da! Yes, thank you for reminding me of this. I have this color checker passport that I'm going to throw in there in a minute once we get closer to where we want to be with this picture. That's what Pratik can use later to just click and have the exact right white balance. Again, he's working off a different file than what I'm showing. But it also helps me in that psychological mindset. If I get this to look great and the client's there going, when I get that moment, I'm like, yes, that's money.
Could you also use like Lightroom or something?
Yeah, of course. I used Aperture before.
Yeah.
And I started using Capture One recently.
Yeah.
And it just didn't crash.
Right.
And when I tethered, and it was like, I did 1,000 images on Monday on a commercial shoot, and not one problem. It was just
That's fantastic.
great. So I kind of have become a convert. And now I'm like, never mind, Aperture, thank you, goodbye. So I'm going to play around. This is the non-technical, technical bit, right? Where I'm just kind of messing around, seeing where I want to go with the contrast. Kayla can just relax. You see, already I've added a little bit of contrast, and the image starts to kind of feel a little bit more like something the client would want to see. I kind of want to bring in a little bit of the shadow just to see where we're at with that hair. There we go, it's just getting a bit of contrast there. This clarity slider is good for clients, but it's horrible for all post-production because it makes all the pores really sharp and then Pratik has to retouch them.
Yeah.
Stay away from
Thanks.
clarity.
Thank you for not doing that, by the way.
In everything. It's just awful. Good. And structure. Like sharpening should be your very last thing, right? Yeah. Here, I can selectively change the tone. I'm kind of happy with that. I just want to see if I add a little bit of yellow, what happens there. It gives it that little bit more glam effect. And again, the curves, just like everywhere else, just a tiny bit of contrast might give us a little bit of an edge that the client can understand. There we go. So if I go back to the original and then back to the image, we already have a little bit more feeling in there. So again, this is for the client to see, this is for me to see what's coming off the camera. There's one other little thing I like to do, which is, where is the color editor? There. Color editor is amazing because it allows you, and Pratik's going to show this properly, right?
Later, yeah.
This was just like, I had this moment where I was going online and I had this, the best human emotion is when you really understand something. I think that's one of the most beautiful things that happens in school when you solve a math problem. I had this with the color editor. It's like, I can finally say exactly. Do you mind if I show a little bit?
Go ahead.
Because you're going to be much better at this.
This is a better aha moment because I think this sells the program by itself. I've never seen anything else do it quite like Capture One does in here.
Let's say I want to, there's lots of programs that do this. I've just clicked on the lips, right? I do like the color, but let's say I didn't, right? I can say, click here, view selected color range, and this is now showing me how much the lip and the skin has some of the same color. If I can make it a little bit more pronounced, I'll show you. Picking another color. Let's pick the color of her hair. You see, it's only showing me the hair and some of the skin that's in the same range. And I can make adjustments just to that. So I'm going to go back to the lips. I'm turning this into a software class. We're supposed to be shooting, but we'll do that later. And then I can change, I can kind of change, I don't know if you can see it.
You can also change the boundaries of the color too.
Yes, exactly. I can change the smoothness, and that how it determines how the progression works between the different colors. And she's looking really sickly on this image now.
And also over here, these little dots you can bring down.
Oh, yeah. I can, so that's kind of going more into the purple or going more into the yellow. But it's beautiful, particularly with skin tones. So I'm going to, let's say, click here somewhere. Right, you see it selected the skin tone down here. And I can change, there's the lightness slider. I can make her skin lighter and darker. And if you have a lot of gradients in the skin, or a shadow that clips off too quickly, you can use that to kind of smooth it out. And the color editor, especially, I did a jewelry shoot with like lots of turquoise and red, and I could just manipulate each of those colors individually. It was beautiful. So I'll leave that back to kind of where it was, because I think I went a little bit overboard with this adjustment. Going back to that. And now I'm kind of thinking, it's a bit too warm. Let's go back to the, where's my color balance, white balance here. Just go back to that. Right, there. Now I'm ready to shoot. Capture One will take that adjustment onto every image. And you can actually set it so that it doesn't show. A lot of software shows you the raw, and then it takes some time to process. Well, that's harsh for the client to see. Capture One, you can set it only show the next image when it's ready, which is a really neat little feature that I absolutely rely on, because I used to feel like a bad photographer because my RAWs looked bad. Don't fall for that. Like they will look awful, right?
Yeah, because a lot of people ask me, where should my raw files be before I get to my final product?
Right.
And a lot of times people don't realize that it's okay to have the raw files not looking completely as you would when you see the final magazine cover. But just the basic principles of making sure your light and shadows are right are the most important things about the shot.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And let me say another thing about why I use Capture One now and I used Aperture. Aperture was fine. Lightroom's fine. I just think that this adds that extra 1%. And where I'm at in my career, using a phase one, obviously it's expensive, but we can add that little percent. It's that law of diminishing returns. Every time you add 1% to your work when you kind of already have it figured out, you're spending a lot of money to get that 1%. What separates us from the very top of the industry, it seems like a huge chasm, but it also
not,
seems
yeah.
so magical because maybe it's only 10%, but that every percent is so hard won. You know?
Exactly, because when you get to that particular level, what sets you above everybody else?
Yeah.
It just keeps adding to it.
Yeah, it takes years.
Yeah.
All right, let's do some shooting. Talking is.
Really quick, Felix, just before you get too far into it, 84 from England. Pratik, is there anything that is done differently for a location shoot versus a studio shoot that you need to be aware of for retouching purposes? Do you do anything different?
Yes. For example, if you're shooting outdoors, there's more ambient light to be considered about. So there's more of a chance for you to blow out highlights and have less control over your lighting. So a lot of times when we're in shoots, people have scrims that cover the sun so that they can still get the ambient light from the back and then still use a studio setup. So sometimes people wonder, like, how are they getting such beautiful shots outdoors? Because I can clearly see the sun in the background. And the reality is, you know, a lot of people are scrimming the shots and they're blocking out the sun so they can still have a studio environment outside without having the sun being interfering in the shot. Secondly, things like wind is a factor. When you have wind coming in, there's a lot of other elements of nature that can play a role in that. So just be aware and pre-plan, go to the location prior to, and maybe even talk to a retoucher and say, you know, this is what we're going to shoot at. Here's a test shot of the model. What do you think? Because then you could save a lot of headache later. The retoucher comes back and says, well, it looks very dirty and windy. So maybe have, you know, a V-flat or something that can block the wind or block the sun. And then that saves a lot of time going forward in your post-production.
Fantastic. And I just want to do one more reminder for folks who may have just joined us after the pre-show when we were just getting started. Today we are focusing in the morning on shooting. And we've got Pratik and Felix here, and they're going to talk about how best to shoot for retouching, things that you can watch for to enhance your ability to retouch or to make the retoucher's job a lot easier. Then this afternoon, we're going to be talking about art and business. Over the next 2 days, we'll be doing all the retouching. We'll be very deep in Pratik's computer and working on that. So with the questions that you're asking today, I'd say focus them on this kind of photography-related retouching questions. And then tomorrow and Saturday is when we'll ask the actual in-depth software-related questions.
Yeah, and I think this is fantastic because you get to see the dynamic that we have behind the scenes. And you can also see where the files came from, so the concepts sit better with you.
Yeah, you'll feel a warm, fuzzy feeling
It's a warm
every time you
feeling.
look at Kayla's face. You'll see a lot of this face over the next couple of days, so warm up to it. That's what I would say. Good. Right, so we're doing this, John? Okay, Kayla, just lean back a little bit so John can get it right where your face is, because we metered for there. Perfect. And that's a file that will be very useful later on, and we only need to do that once. Thank you, John. Okay, Pratik, do you have any other points about how we're doing the tether before I start doing the actual shoot?
I think you pretty much explained everything that I would have, wanted you to cover with regards to tethering. But also keep in mind that, again, like you mentioned, a good point being, this is your workflow, but this can be translated to whatever program you use as well. So it's fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just a really quick question about the color checker. Can you explain to people what that is, what the color checker is? And then also, this is something that you are just using for reference for later. It's not something where you're going to take the picture and then make adjustments to your camera right now.
I don't use it that way. I think there is a way to do that. If I was really very technical, which I'm not, I would probably calibrate my camera and all the software. There's a way of doing that. I started always by getting, I had a white balance little card that was in my wallet, and I think it stopped working because it got so dirty. But I used to use that a lot just because I didn't know, if you're starting out or you want to learn, it's just it takes that little bit of uncertainty out of it. I think that's what its use is for. It's just so you know your white balance is right, rather than going I don't know. You can slide that slider all you want, but sometimes when you just get it right, it just looks right, and couldn't I do that with the slider?
Yeah, and keep in mind, even though there are times, white balance is a very artistic thing as well, isn't it? Even though it's not perfect, it's okay to be off and, on one direction or the other. If you feel like a particular mood has a particular white balance, for example. So this is just being very technical and very accurate, but it's okay not to be extremely technical about it.
Yeah, and if you mention artistic and white balance, I'll...
Pleasing color versus accurate color.
Exactly.
And Jessica...
Can I... Go on.
I just wanted to Ask if Pratik, you use the color checker with its own software to create the profile when you first start editing, or are you going off your own?
So sometimes what happens is, like Felix, for example, may use a color checker to say, hey, this is going to be exact white balance. Sometimes the client won't. They'll leave it to me to decide. So it's just relative to who's shooting, which is why I mentioned the point of, sometimes okay if you don't have a exact white balance prior to, because we can always do that later on. But to answer your question, no, I don't do it all the time.
It becomes important if you, like I said, the jewelry, different
Yeah.
colors, you want to make sure they're just right. They spend thousands and thousands of dollars getting at the exact right shade of turquoise
Yeah.
out of a mine, and you can't replicate it in a shoot. That's a
I just
problem.
did a commercial campaign. It was this lingerie brand, and what they basically said to me was, when they shot the files, the white balance was a little bit off because they're going for a particular mood. The client was, but then later they came back and said, well, I like the mood. It's just that now the turquoise is a different shade of turquoise. Could you please color match it later? So it kind of saves that headache.
Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just happens though.
So
Great.
it's the
Topical.
more you know.
Yeah.
There you go. So I'm going to show you what happens if I drop onto, and I believe it's this, isn't it, John? That's the correct.
Neutral, yeah.
That's the neutral white balance, and it made almost no change at all.
You see how perfect it was.
That's just me,
compared to your
Pratik. I don't
preset.
know
It
what
was
to-
Felix. Yeah.
It's a joke. Okay. So that's that. But I want to go back to this image and just show you what I do, because Pratik mentioned artistic. You can change the Kelvin a lot, and I think that always kind of dies. But sometimes, to give it that kind of fill look, I'll play with the tint just a tad. So you could kind of have this cross-processed look by adding the red or the green. And I don't think that's as bad if you do it subtly. I've managed to do kind of.
That's another really good point you brought up, because with raw files, typically people know that the amount of information you have in a raw file is pretty extensive when it comes to lighting, but it's equally extensive when it comes to color, because you can't change white balance like this once you've opened the file in Photoshop. It becomes extremely hard to have realistic shifts like you would when you have the raw file, which is also why it's important to have the white balance perfect, because the raw file contains much more color depth as well.
Yeah, so while I'm messing the image up, Pratik, when he goes back to the
Yeah, I'm like, just
the
shoot in raw,
basic,
we're good.
He'll be fine. Good. So we'll get to actual shooting.
Yes, now we're good. But now we can shoot away.
Perfect. All right, Kayla. So what we're gonna do is I want you to get that femme fatale thing going on. There you go. She's an actress. This is wonderful. You can just tell her, and she goes, "Yep, I got this." Good. And just perfect. Good. And we can just. Oh, one thing I forgot to check. Slap. Focus. I am going to check that we are in focus on the eyes using the little loop tool. Pratik, let's see, the file hasn't loaded in yet.
Go to the center of the eye.
There we go. It's a little bit soft.
Go to the lips. Let's see how that is doing.
I am doing well with this focus. I'm glad I'm checking this. What do you think, Pratik? Let's see what we have on this image. And usually you'd have it, this
there we go.
one's sharp. Okay, I think I'm getting about 1 every 2. That's fine. That'll do. That's the reality, by the way.
That
if
is
anyone
reality.
pretends they're getting everything in.
No.
way.
And yeah.
And we're at F11, so this is
People who shoot at 1.2.
1.2, they have trouble with this, yeah. Okay, I think it's up. And Pratik, would you mind going over and driving and just seeing if we're getting it in focus? Thank you. All right, Kayla, perfect. And Kayla, feel free to vary the pose every time, and the eyes, it's all in the eyes. Let's do a little bit of the slightly open mouth. Yeah, beautiful. And
Now it's perfect.
that's what I like to hear.
Good job.
Good, Kayla, that's lovely. And can you just put your hand up into your hair, kind of like this? Yeah, lovely. Good, so I'm just, if I'm doing a commercial job, let's say we had jewelry, we could show the jewelry, her rings right there. Let me see how that's coming in. I'm actually going to come up a little bit on my tripod here and shoot down. There we go. I think that's a bit more pleasing. And the main thing is, I might not get every pose perfect. I might not have the right idea right away. I'm just going to move through and keep changing things until I feel it works. So you notice I'm focusing, recomposing, focusing on the eyes, recomposing, and each of the images are coming in beautifully.
They are.
What do you think? I'm going to also change to portrait orientation, just because I feel like we can get a little bit more detail on the dress, and that might work nicely. Kayla, how are your nails? Yeah. Let's show. Okay. It's good for retouching.
Oh, boy.
Right. Let's give Pratik a little challenge. Perfect. That's a nice smile you have there. Good. Let's show everyone how you would do like a nail story, like, you know? Yeah, exactly. Good. Perfect. I just wanted to show that we're not actually going to use the nails, but kind of getting it in front of the face, and I haven't done the lighting for the nails, so, oh well. Good. Kayla, let's do the femme fatale thing. I'm going to come up a little bit. Pratik, any thoughts so far?
I think, once you got your lighting right, that's been great. Trying to see what about the eyes, maybe.
The eyes, you want to get a little bit more in the eyes. Well, this is also because she's leaning down a little bit.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
Is
so-
making sure that expression stays up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're going to stay up there. And, I might even let's do it quite drastic, like with the eyes closed and up. Yeah, beautiful. And I'm going to come in a little bit closer even. And let's see where I can focus this thing. I'm too close. Okay, 1 second. Beautiful, Kayla. And just turn your head slightly more. Good. Eyes and chin up. Beautiful. Okay, and I'm going to be competing right with this. And just turn your head towards me a little bit. And let me just direct you directly. Yeah, up. Beautiful. There. Good. Great. And I can. That's another thing I was going to show you. Hang on 1 second. Good. Oh, God, I'm really good at this frame, aren't I? All right, let's try that again. That's me just using the focus. I think that's what I had in mind. Let's see. Yeah.
That's close, yeah.
That's far better.
That fills the frame better.
Okay, good. Get away with it. John, is the black side on there, or what do we have on the other
No,
side?
the other side's gold.
The other side's gold.
you want-
Let's not use that.
No.
Let me just show you how let me do one with the
Without.
reflector and without, just to show that little difference. Kayla, again, that light up. And I'm going to change the light around a little bit to get a little bit more contrast. I want to just see if we do this,
That may be better.
that may be better. Let's
Yeah.
see. Beautiful. So again, I'm just giving myself options. If you want to
here's
give your
with.
client options.
When
Now
you
we have-
look at files like this, how much shadow do you typically leave under the neck? Do you care how deep it is?
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to minimize with this, with the light kind of coming up a little bit. To get a little bit of a deeper shadow, I think there's a little bit too much concentration on the neck here.